Hi guys, and welcome back to Scalemotor. I understand it's been a little while. I've had some issues with space for editing, but now we've sorted that. We're over that hurdle and we're back with another bike. We're going to be starting on our Yamaha YZF-R1 from Tamiya. One of my all-time favourite bikes. I had this as a poster on my wall when I was a kid. Absolutely love the bike, and now I own one. So I'm going to be building this like my one. It's not the most looked after bike. It's quite old. I was using it daily for work. I put a lot of miles on it and I was using it in all weathers, so it tended to get grubby every now and again, which will be reflected in the build. This episode we're going to be focusing on getting the engine and the exhaust built up and painted and weathered. So now all I'm just doing is going through our bags just to see exactly what it is we have in the kit. It's quite a nice bit of detail, but having the bike myself and worked on it myself, I see lots of room for improvement. So we will be putting a couple of bits and bobs on just to improve the realism, I suppose. Yeah, so it's not gonna be a perfect showroom condition bike because, well, it's 20 odd year old. So yeah, it's not gonna be perfect. Okay, you can see my bench is littered with parts just because I took everything off the sprues. I got the fairings off and the frame just because I wanted a test fit, and we were drilling holes because we're going to be using magnets to attach the fairings to the frame. It's the first time I've ever done this, so hopefully it goes well. But now we're going to be focusing on cutting the engine off the sprue. There's quite a few little bits and bobs. The engine is mostly two different colours, and that's just an aluminium colour and a nice black colour for the head. So we're going to get all the parts we needed for the engine painted up first, just so we can get it all together. So again, just cutting things off and test fitting. There's quite a few little bits and bobs, and the sprue locator points in some places aren't in the best place, shall we say. So I'm just nipping it off now just to make sure everything fits, and then once we've nipped it off, we'll come in with our UMP sanders and just clean the area up just to make sure we've got rid of all of that sprue locator point, because we want everything to fit nicely. If there are stubborn bits, you can come in with a file. Using the Tamiya basic files here. They are, as they say in the name, they are pretty basic. They're a little bit coarse, but they will get the job done. And once we were finished with the engine, we cut the exhaust pieces off the sprue. There were quite a few mould lines, as there normally are on cylindrical or round parts or pipes. So just lightly going over it with the blade of our craft knife, and this will knock kind of the main bulk off, the top bit off. Don't go too heavy, because you'll end up kind of missshaping the part, which isn't great because you'll end up not very circular. I don't always do this. Sometimes I say sometimes. Normally I prefer to use a sponge sander, like the UMP sanders that I use, just because they conform really well to cylindrical shapes, and you'll have a hard time kind of deforming or misshaping the part using them. Like I said, I've just gone very light with the craft knife over the top, just to kind of knock off the main bulk, and once I see that it's kind of maybe looks like it's going to start scratching the part or misshaping the part, that's when I'll come in with the sanders, and I'll go through the various grades until we're using the buffer and we get a nice shine. And that's what I'm doing here. These are the UMP thinny sticks. I wasn't using these originally, I was using the normal UMP sanders, and I thought I don't need the thinny sticks, the normal ones will do everything the thinny sticks will do. However, now they're my go-to. I prefer them over the standard sanders just because obviously we were working with smaller things while doing a bike, so it's easier to get into all the little nooks and the crannies, and the plastic running down the centre has got a little bit of give, as you can see there, so you have to work really hard if you do want to end up making a mistake and misshapen the part. So they're a lot more forgiving and they're just brilliant to use. And like I said, we go up through the grades until we get to the white and blue buffer, and then we buff the plastic up and it looks as good as new. And there we go, here we are coming in with the buffer. It's the blue side first, and then the white side, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm just going to take a look. Yeah, so you go for the blue side, and then the white side. It's been a little while since I've recorded this. It's just kind of second nature, I just go in and do it, and I don't actually think about which side I'm using, but yeah, so it's the blue side first, and then the white side, and the white side you'll hear that it'll start to squeak a little bit on the plastic, and that's when you know you're coming to a high shine and you've got the best finish you can. So then we came to sticking the engine together. Now we've test fitted everything and got rid of all the little sprue locator points and everything, but we are still going to test fit again just in case. Because there's kind of no going back after you've used this glue. So we're using the Tamiya extra thin, and we're just running a little bit down into those holes where the two engine halves connect, and then we're going to give it a little push, and then we're going to come along the seam on the inside again with the Tamiya extra thin, and because of how thin the glue is, the capillary action will pull that glue into the seam. We'll give it a little squeeze, and you should have a very nice bond there. So for the front part and the back part of the engine block, we're just going to get them into place. Again, test fitting to make sure that it all fits. We're just going to hold it in place, and then we're going to use the Tamiya extra thin again just to run along the joins on the inside, and then when we give it a little squeeze, a little bit of plastic you should see protruding out of the seam or the join, and this is why we're doing it on the inside, so we don't have loads of cleanup to do on the outside. There's a couple of bits and bobs I don't stick on straight away just because they either have to be painted a different colour, or we're going to do further little bits of detail to them. And there we're just making sure everything is nice and tight and all together, and then we're going to move on. Now I didn't want to glue our cam cover on straight away, just because I wasn't sure if I was going to do any other kind of detailing at top. So we left it off for now, and it is a different colour from kind of the main part of the block, the bottom end, shall we say. so I just thought it would be easier to separate. And then if we do detail or add little bits to it later on, it's not attached, so we haven't got to worry about trying to get it off or not harming other parts of the engine. And speaking of adding extra detail, what I'm doing here is I'm just I've cut off the little styrene connector for the Tamiya kind of tube for the clutch cable, and I'm drilling a hole where that was because we're gonna scratch build our own little clutch actuator arm out of leftover pieces of photoetch, just because the one in the kit doesn't look all too realistic and it doesn't really connect where the real one would. It looks a bit out of place. Okay, so what we're doing now is we're just starting to make that clutch actuator arm, or whatever it is you would like to call it. I've just got a small bolt which I got from Prime Miniatures. I've cut the head of the bolt just so we've got a little shaft, and we're just going to pop that in the hole we've drilled just to make sure we get it the right size, because we don't need to look out of scale after we've spent all this time cutting bits off and making it. So this part was relatively simple compared to making the rest of it, and to be honest, making this little clutch actuator was pretty easy, as long as you have the bits. I just had leftover photoetch. Most of the parts I've used are from the RC213V Super Detail set. As you can see, there's just little bits there which I've just glued together, and they're just kind of little teardrop shape parts which we'll paint up to match the black of the real one. And now I'm just making a little spring for the clutch actuator arm, and all I've done is I've got some very thin gauge wire. This again came with a Super Detail set from Top Studio. You get loads of these strands, and I've got tons knocking about because you've always got some left over. But yeah, all I've done is got a small drill bit and wrapped the wire around the drill bit to make a small spring. I've cut off a bit of the excess, but I've left some so I can still grip it and I can still paint it, and it's a lot harder to lose when it's got a big tail. And here we can see the spring around that little shaft we popped in earlier. Hopefully, if I can get it to focus, there we go. And next up was the exhaust. So we've cut the stock end can off because my bike does not have the stock end can. I've got an aftermarket Lextech one. And the only reason I have that is because that was on my previous bike, which is now in bits in the garage because it was written off. And the can which came on this bike when I bought it, I wasn't really a fan of, so I swapped it out to this one. It sounds great and it does the job, but I had to replicate it in scale. So I took some measurements, as you might be able to see on that piece of paper behind my hands now. And I divided them by 12, just so I've got a 1/12 scale measurement set. And we cut some stuff out of styrene, just little ovals in a similar kind of shape to the right size, and then we put a bit of styrene tube going through the middle of these to act as the actual exhaust pipe. And then we've got some very thin styrene which we're just gonna cut to the correct length and then wrap around, which is what we're doing here. We're just testing it, just making sure we have enough. We're gonna mark it and then cut it. it is times like this where I wish I had a good 3D printer. My 3D printer is now in the garage because it is terrible. It was a cheapy ANET kit, FDM. I could never really get a great print out of it, and I didn't want to be messing with it all the time, so now it's in the garage. I am contemplating getting a resin 3D printer though, so hopefully in the future things like this would be so much easier. But for now we'll stick to scratch building. I mean, I didn't want to skip past scratch building because I've only been building models for just over a year now, so I think it's a good skill to have to be able to scratch build parts for your models. Not that just 3D printing them is not a good option. 100% 3D print them. But I think I didn't want to skip the scratch building kind of process. I wanted to learn how to do it just in case I ever did need to, and then in the future when I do get a 3D printer I can kind of skip that then, and I know I'll have a little bit of scratch building knowledge in the bank. So now we're just gluing on our sleeve, I suppose, the exhaust sleeve for the can. We put a little supporting rod going across the top, and then we glued our strip to this supporting rod, and then just wrapped it around and run the Tamiya extra thin all along the outside. Like I said, this styrene is very, very thin, so it was quite easy to bend around. I cut quite a bit out because what we done is we went halfway round, popped a bit of glue in, and held it there for a little while just to get that glue to set, and then we went the rest of the way around, and now we're just filling any gaps with that extra thin, and then we're going to hold that, and then once that's dry we're just going to do the very, very end. And there we have the majority of our exhaust end can. So yeah, we got the shape right. I'm holding it up now just to make sure it doesn't look too out of scale. It's a bit hard to tell at the moment because we haven't got the frame and everything for kind of visual reference. But I was happy with it, so I started going around and cleaning bits up. Now before I started this, I didn't have a game plan in my head on how I was going to build it, so I just got cracking. And then it came to the cone on the end, the kind of exhaust tip which covers the exhaust pipe on the end. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I toyed with many ideas. I tried using the thin styrene, which I use for the sleeve, to kind of fold it into an oval based cone. I made an oval based cone on Fusion 360 with a sheet metal mode, unfolded it, printed that out. Yep, that didn't go well, so in the end we settled on Milliput. Because the shape, as you can see my various attempts in the background, the shape isn't easy to make out of a net. At least by somebody with my skill level. So in the end we just got some 2-part Milliput, and we just got a blob and ended up sanding it down to shape. It's the first time I've used Milliput for anything. It's been sitting on my shelf for a good few months. I bought it on my last trip to Hobbycraft just because it was there, and I thought I might use that in the future, and good thing I did. So all you got to do is you get the two kind of sticks, and it's a 2-part epoxy putty, and you've got kind of the main bit and a hardening bit, and when you mix them together they react and eventually they harden to near rock-like consistency. I was quite lucky on my first kind of go. I've spoke to people who've said it's kind of hit and miss. Sometimes it'll harden nicely, sometimes it won't. I suppose it depends on if it's a new pack, if it's an old pack. I have no idea. I just kind of went into it blind, hoped it worked, and thankfully it did. So I was literally just kind of folding it all together till it's all kind of one consistent colour. And when it is, all I done is shaped it into kind of the rough shape of the exhaust cone, which is an oval based cone. It looks kind of... And we're just offering it up to make sure it is oversized on each axis with each dimension, so that we've got plenty of material to work with when it comes to shaping. That extra little bit was part of this batch of Milliput I made up. I tried kind of flattening it and rolling it round, and that didn't work, so in the end we decided to just make a big blob. And while we were waiting for that to dry, I came across these top savior rivets, and I thought, yeah, we're going to use them. So all I'm doing here is going around the engine cases, which are going to be visible. So it's kind of the two, the two bits on the side. So we've got the clutch cover, and the other side, I believe, is the stator cover. And all we're going to be doing is using our craft knife. I'm using OLFA blades. These are excellent. Excellent compared to what I've been using. I've just been using standard kind of no brand hobby blades. They dull really, really quickly, but these OLFA ones, they last a while. But yeah, we're just going to use it to knock the tops off the kind of pre-molded in bolts. And once we've gone round and done that, we're going to come in with our pin vise, and we're just going to drill holes where the heads were previously. We're going to drill all the way through, just because it's so much easier than guessing the depth you need or having to trim down the rivets. Just go all the way through, and then you know your rivets are going to fit. Rivets I got from Hero Boy. They're made by Top Studio, and they are the 0.9mm rivets. That's the head. So the diameter of the head is 0.9mm. This kind of is pretty much in scale. The rivets aren't always easy to get hold of. Hero Boy sometimes have stock, sometimes they don't. There's various other places to get them. I just get from Hero Boy normally because they stock quite a lot, and it just makes sense if I'm buying quite a few bits and bobs. So now all we're going to be doing is just test fitting one, just to make sure that our hole is wide enough, and make sure it fits, and make sure it doesn't look too out of scale. If it did end up looking out of scale, either too big or too small, I'd just order more. It's always nice to have these little kind of spares and little bits knocking about. But there we go. I don't think it looks too bad. And I would like to apologise for the kind of focus and where I'm putting my hands when I'm showing stuff to the camera. I was using another one of my phones. I've got two. I've got an old one which had been knocking about in a drawer. It's pretty much the same camera as my current phone, so I've been using that. It's just the camera's in a different place. So I'm not used to it. I will be going back to the other phone. Like I said, I had space issues, which is the only reason I was using this phone. But yeah, next up I've got some steel cable. This is from Prime Miniatures. I'll leave a link down in the description. They've got some really cool little kind of detail stuff, and that's what's littered all over my bench. Now I've got some fibre optics for lights, some bolts, some eyelets. I've got loads of little bits and bobs from them. But yeah, so we're just using some thin steel cable. It's actually wound cable, which looks pretty much like a scale version of what an actual clutch cable would look like. And we've test fit everything together just so we can get the right length. I didn't want to go with the length in the Tamiya instructions, just in case. It was a little bit too short, a little bit too long, and obviously we've changed the connecting point now, so I just wanted to make sure we had it right. And now for some of my my favourite parts, and that's painting. We're coming in first with the UMP Gloss Black Primer, and we're using this straight out of the bottle, and we're going to prime everything with this. I'm going to build it up slowly with the engine. Just make sure you get into all the kind of little nooks and crannies, because there are loads of little recesses and stuff where you need to kind of make sure that primer goes in. And the same with the exhaust. Just kind of, because they are pipes, you want to try and make sure you cover every part of the pipe, because it is hard to miss. It is easy to miss, and you don't want that. You want a nice even layer of primer. I always use my first layer just to make sure I hit everything, and then I come in with subsequent coats. Now these black casing parts we left painted in this gloss black primer. I think it's an amazing primer. It's great as a primer, and it makes a lovely kind of final colour. I use it quite often in place of semi-gloss blacks when maybe I don't want it to be that semi-glossy. And then we're going to come in now with alcad aluminium, and we're going to be painting the engine parts. So this is actually plastic in real life, and it is the front sprocket cover. So we might do a little bit of different weathering on that later, just to kind of dull it down a bit, because it's not as shiny as the rest of the engine. And again, as normal with alcad, we're going to do thin layers and build them up slowly. And it was about this point I realised that I totally forgot to mask off the top of the engine block. So the cylinder and the cylinder head are black. They're a kind of glossy black, which will dull with age, like mine has. So what I'm doing now is I'm just using some 1mm masking tape, and I'm going all the way around. There is a separation line you can see on the moulded in detail, which you want to follow. It can be quite tricky. What I like to do is use a cocktail stick, as you can see here, and my finger. I'm slightly out of shot, again, not used to the camera, sorry. But yeah, so I'm just using my finger to kind of hold the tape on a corner, stretch it over to the other side to kind of where it needs to go, and then we're using the cocktail stick just to push it into all of the recesses. And then once we're done with this tape, we'll come in with a thicker tape, so maybe 3mm, and we'll slightly overlap that, and then we'll come in with the even thicker tape just to kind of block off the rest of the top. And then we're going to come in without alcad aluminium. I did use a bit of liquid mask on this, which is the blue stuff you could see. It's Micromark. No, it's not. Sorry, Micromark. It's Microscale Industries liquid mask, and that was just because I was a little bit worried of gaps. So I kind of run it along where the masking tape met each kind of different size. just to make sure I had a clean kind of seal, shall we say. Okay, next up, more alcad, and this time it's the alcad chrome. Again, we're going to be spraying this thin, and we just want to build up the layers until we get that desired shine. With alcad, I like to tighten my trigger tension. Now I'm using the UMP Apex airbrush, and with this is super easy to adjust the trigger tension. I'd imagine it's quite similar with other airbrushes, and you just take the back off, and there's a kind of threaded tube around the needle clamp, I believe it's called, and you just tighten that in for a tighter tension and loosen it out for looser tension. I like to go quite tight when I'm painting alcad, and I do turn my pressure down a little bit too. The tight kind of trigger stops me over applying from kind of muscle memory of painting other things, because the Tamiya LPs I like to use and the Ultimate Primers, they're very forgiving if you go a little too thick with them, so I'm not as conscious when I'm using them as when I'm using alcad. So just to kind of stop that kind of user error, I'll tighten that trigger tension just to kind of help me. So we're going over our exhaust pipes now with the chrome. Now the kind of link pipe I have on my bike is very, very chrome. The stock link pipe kind of browns with age, goes kind of bronzy, and that's the same thing that happens to the down pipes. So we do try to recreate that with various different layers of paint. So first up, after our chrome, we've got the alcad hot metal sepia. Sorry, that took me a while. So this is kind of like a browny, cleary, kind of slightly yellow paint, and this will be used on exhausts, and you'll see it on kind of older exhausts often. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of go over the kind of more weathered areas, or the areas which will get more heat. I haven't sprayed this neat. I've mixed it with the chrome. So unfortunately I can't tell you the ratio, I'm not sure myself, but we just went over very lightly with that, and then we came in with the alcad polished brass just to get a nice shine, and we want a slightly golden tone. So we're going over our chrome, but very, very thinly, and we're not going to build it up like we would have if we were kind of painting something chrome. For argument's sake, we want it thin over the top. So we still want it to shine, but we want it just kind of translucent, shall we say. So just kind of build it up until you're happy. And don't push it further. Once you're happy, don't carry on going thinking maybe it'll look better, because you can end up ruining it. Next up again, more alcad, and this one is alcad exhaust manifold. And this is going to be the darkest colour of the lot, and we're going to be using this mainly kind of to add a bit of age in. We'll go over the parts which will see the most kind of abuse from the weather and heat. So kind of the collector box in the middle, which is where our exhaust valve is, the X-up valve, and we'll be going over kind of where the pipes connect to the head, and just on those kind of bends just down at the bottom. And we're going to do slightly coming up the link pipe, because it will see quite a bit of heat there. And looking at my actual bike, it does seem to be browning down the bottom a lot more than the kind of rest of the pipe. And I do, when I clean the bike, I will polish the link pipe so that kind of brings it up to a nice chrome shine too. And there we have it. We're not done with the exhaust. We're going to be adding a bit more weathering, but you can see it's got that kind of aged, bronzy kind of look to it, which is what we were after. And now we're just removing our masking from the head of the engine. Now again, like the kind of sides, the side casings, this is the black paint you see is just the UMP gloss black primer. Just grabbing my tweezers just to pick off that last little bit, and I was worried about any bleed through or kind of feathering, but it seems to have turned out quite alright. Far too clean for a bike that's used daily. But we'll go on to sort that now. So first up, we're going to be doing our shadow areas, and we're using the Tamiya panel line accent colour. This one's the black one, and we're just going to be, as we've done before in previous videos, we're just going to kind of pull it on in the kind of recessed areas or anywhere we want shadow, just to make things stand out, just to make the raised areas stand out a little bit more and add a bit of depth. Now the way I normally do it is I will pull it on and then I'll come in with the cotton buds, which is why there's cotton buds on my desk ready, straight away, just to kind of pick up most of that. But since we're going for a kind of grungy, old, used look, it does kill me a bit to be saying this about something that's modelled after my own bike, but it does look used. But since we're going for that used look, I was a bit more liberal with the application. And we're just going to go around all of the parts which we've just painted, just to make sure we've got our our low lights, shall we say. And again, like I said, I'm being quite liberal with it because I want to go for that kind of old, used look. If you do put too much on, you can kind of either come in straight away and pick it up, or you can leave it to dry and then use some mineral spirits or enamel thinners, or like I use lighter fluid just to take away any excess with the cotton bud. So I'm doing now, just taking away a bit of the excess just before it dries. Once we've done that, we're going to come in with our AK True Metal. This is steel, and I'm going to use this to do kind of the opposite of what we were just doing, and I'm going to use it for highlights. So we're just going to get a little bit on a kind of stiff flat bristle brush, wipe the majority of it off on a piece of paper, which we've done on the left, and then brush over, catching our raised bits with just a little bit of shine. I like to do this to kind of used metal, just because it adds, in my eyes, it seems to add like a little bit of wear, and it makes it kind of come alive. It looks like the edges have been kind of rubbed or knocked, or, you know, in my case when I'm taking the bearings on and off and, you know, changing the oil and whatnot, it just kind of gives it a bit of use. It looks like kind of just some natural wear. It was a bit tough to see it over the aluminium, so we did go a little bit further, and then later on, when it comes to weathering, it seemed a bit pointless. But these kind of the black bits is where it really kind of stands out, because it does kind of, because we can't put the panel liner on the black bits with, well, the black panel liner at least, having a little bit of kind of depth added kind of ties it all together in my eyes. You can see on the top corner of my mat there we have an accidental purchase, which was the alcad dust pigment. When I was buying the alcad paints, I accidentally added the dust to my basket just because I was looking at the pigments. I didn't realise I'd done it until it showed up. I haven't really had a chance to use it, but there are other pigments which I am looking at. UMP have just brought out a line, and I've seen a few people using them, and they look the business. So I think I'm going to be getting some of them soon. I'm probably not going to use them often, mainly building cars and bikes, but it'll be really handy to have. And then this was our next step. So we're using Valejo. This came in a set, and it was kind of rust effect set. I've never used Valejo before in my life, and I know this is Model Air, which is meant to be airbrushed, but I dry brushed it. I tried to use it to look like dirt and rust. I've knocked a big chunk of this out, just because we went through all, was it 5-6 colours? As you can see on my my makeshift palette. Now on an old bike, which does get used a lot, and in all weathers, you will see kind of mud and rusty water and kind of road grime flicking up on the engine, unless of course it is looked after. Mine's not that looked after, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say. So I do get a lot of gunk, and that's what I'm trying to simulate here. We're just using some Dali oil pastels. I've had these since for years. They've just kind of followed me, and I've never ever used them. So I thought I'd try and make a kind of weathering pigment, shall we say. So I mixed some of the brown with some of the black and some PVA glue. Then I got a toothpick, and I just started applying it onto the model into areas I thought gunk would accumulate. I hate saying the word gunk. It's grubby. So yeah, I've just kind of popped it into areas which would be harder to clean, or areas you don't normally you wouldn't be able to get at while you're cleaning, or areas which are going to be dirty, like there's more on the front of the engine than the back of the engine, on the sides where it'll flick up from the wheel, and it does look a bit stark at the moment, but it does dull down when the PVA dries, kind of mats it out a bit. And I'm just using cotton bud again just to take off any excess. This was kind of a last minute decision. I wasn't going to go this grubby, but you know what, I thought while I was there the engine just looked too clean to be an old kind of bike. So I thought, well, may as well. I'm quite happy I did, because I think it turned out pretty cool. And there we can see the majority of the gunk. Like I said, it looks a bit stark at the moment, but it does dry a little less vibrant and a little less matte. So, a little more matte. So it does look like kind of accumulated dirt. And that's it. This is where we got to. I absolutely loved making this engine, just super duper grubby, even though it is embarrassing because it's modelled after my bike. But this is kind of the theme we're going to go for. We're going to try and make it look used, just because that's what my bike is. It is used. I'm not a fan of, you know, if I buy a bike, I'm not going to keep it to look after the miles. I'm going to use it. But yeah, so if you enjoyed watching this as much as I did building it, then please don't forget to comment, like and subscribe. But in the meantime, thank you for watching, have a great day and stay safe.